The call timer blinked. 43 to 12. Lashonda Williams had just saved the most dangerous man in Atlanta from a RICO indictment, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Is he gone? Melissa's whisper cut through the silence of the glass-walled conference room. Lashonda glanced at her phone one more time before tossing it onto the mahogany table. She sank into her chair, the leather creaking beneath her. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Atlanta skyline glittered like broken promises. "I need a drink," Sarah muttered, fanning herself with a deposition file. "That man's voice should come with a warning label that says we'll ruin your life and you'll thank him for it," Lisa added with a grin. Lashonda pressed her fingers against her temples. 3 years. 3 years of midnight calls and cryptic text messages. 3 years of black roses delivered to her office with no note. 3 years of pretending her heart didn't slam against her ribs every time Lee Min-hoo said her name like it was something sacred. "Come on, Lashonda." Melissa leaned forward, eyes sparkling with mischief. "You can't tell me there's nothing there. The way he listens when you talk, the way he only trusts you with his life. Girl, that's not just business. It's a professional relationship," Lashonda said, but the words felt hollow, built on mutual respect and the understanding that I'm the only lawyer in this city who can keep him breathing. Mutual respect. Sarah laughed. "Is that what we're calling it? Because last week he sent you a first-edition legal manuscript from 1847 just because you mentioned it once in passing." Lashonda felt the smile before she could stop it, that warmth spreading through her chest, dangerous and intoxicating. "Fine," she breathed. "I love him. I love that beautiful, terrifying monster, and I'm drowning in it." The room went silent. Then her phone screen lit up on the table. Call duration. 44 to 27. Still active. A voice, low, deliberate, laced with something between amusement and hunger, rolled through the speaker. "Lashonda, don't hang up." But to understand how a defense attorney falls for the devil she's supposed to keep in the shadows, we need to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to the moment Lashonda Williams first locked eyes with Lee Min-hoo and made a choice that would seal both their fates. The penthouse door opened before Lashonda could find her keys. Lee Min-hoo stood in the threshold, backlit by the amber glow of her own living room, and the sight of him stole the air from her lungs. He wore black, always black, but tonight the fabric clung to him like a second skin, still damp from the rain she could smell on his wool coat. He didn't ask permission. He never did. Min-hoo stepped inside, and the space that had always felt vast suddenly shrank around them. The click of the door closing behind him sounded like a verdict. "You've been avoiding my calls," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. His eyes, dark, unreadable, tracked every micro-expression on her face. "For 6 hours." Lashonda set her briefcase down with deliberate care, buying herself seconds to rebuild the walls he'd shattered with a single sentence on that phone call. Her barrister's wig sat on the entry table, a reminder of the armor she wore in courtrooms. But here, in her sanctuary, she had nothing to hide behind. "I needed time to think," she said, proud her voice didn't waver. "Time." He repeated the word like it was a foreign concept. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of rain and something darker, leather and smoke and the faint metallic tang of danger. "What exactly were you thinking about, Lashonda? How to take back a confession? How to pretend your heart doesn't betray you every time I'm near?" Her spine straightened. "You recorded me. I saved you." His correction was surgical. He pulled his phone from his pocket, the screen illuminating the sharp angles of his face. "You have enemies, counselor. People who would use your feelings as a weapon. But if those feelings are already mine," he let the implication hang between them like a blade. "So, this is blackmail." The words tasted like ash, but she forced them out anyway. Min-hoo's laugh was soft, almost sad. "This is protection." He set the phone on her coffee table, then produced a document from inside his coat. The paper was cream-colored, expensive, embossed with gold. A marriage contract. 6 months, renewable. You maintain your practice, your independence. In exchange, you become untouchable. My wife, my queen. Lashonda's hands trembled as she took the contract. The terms were generous to the point of absurdity. Her own bank accounts, her own properties, a trust fund that would set up generations. But the final clause made her breath catch. In the event of dissolution, all recordings and evidence of emotional attachment will be destroyed. "You're giving me an exit," she whispered, hating how her voice cracked. "I'm giving you a choice." Min-hoo stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. Sign it and live under my protection. Or walk away and spend every day wondering if the next person you defend will be the one who uses your heart to cut your throat. She looked up at him, really looked. Beneath the predator's mask, she saw something raw, something that looked almost like fear. "And what do you get out of this?" she asked. His hand rose, fingers hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. "I get to sleep at night knowing you're safe, even if you hate me for it." Lashonda signed the contract with a hand that barely shook. As the ink dried, Min-hoo exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath underwater. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "You're not the only one who's been keeping secrets." The street Regis Atlanta dripped with old money and older secrets. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, and the charity gala's attendees moved through the grand ballroom like schools of glittering fish. Beautiful, cold, calculating. Lashonda stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the silver silk gown that clung to her curves like liquid moonlight. The fabric was obscenely expensive, a gift from Min-hoo that had arrived that morning with a note in his precise handwriting. "Wear this. Let them see what I see." But what he saw and what she was hiding were two very different things. Her hand drifted to her abdomen, still flat beneath the silk. 6 weeks. That's how long she'd known. The pregnancy test had sat on her bathroom counter for 3 days before she'd found the courage to look at it. And even then, the 2 pink lines had felt like a death sentence. One night, one moment of weakness after a case that had nearly killed them both, Min-hoo had shown up at her door bleeding from a knife wound, refusing a hospital, and she'd stitched him up on her kitchen table while he'd watched her with those devastating eyes. The bourbon had been her idea. The kiss had been mutual. Everything after had been inevitable. "Stop thinking so loud." Min-hoo's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "I can hear it from across the penthouse." He appeared in her doorway, devastating in a midnight blue tuxedo that made his eyes look almost black. His gaze traveled the length of her body with the precision of a man conducting an inventory, and when his eyes met hers again, something dangerous flickered in their depths. "You look like a weapon," he said softly. "I am a weapon," she countered, reaching for her diamond earrings. Also his gift, also excessive. "You made sure of that." He moved into the room, silent as smoke, until he stood behind her. His reflection in the mirror was a study in restraint, jaw tight, hands carefully at his sides, that muscle in his temple that only jumped when he was fighting his own nature. "Let me," he said, taking the earrings from her trembling fingers. His touch was reverent as he fastened the first diamond to her ear, his breath warm against her neck. Lashonda's eyes fluttered closed, and she hated herself for leaning into him, for the way her body recognized his before her mind could catch up. "You've been different," Min-hoo murmured, securing the second earring. His fingers lingered on her jaw. "Tired, distracted. If someone's threatening you, no one's threatening me." The lie came too quickly. His eyes narrowed in the mirror. "Then what?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications she wasn't ready to unpack. Instead, she turned to face him, which was a mistake. This close, she could count his eyelashes, see the faint scar above his eyebrow, smell the bergamot and smoke of his cologne. "We're going to be late," she said. "I don't care." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Tell me what's wrong, Lashonda. Let me fix it." "You can't fix this," she thought. "You can't undo the fact that I'm carrying your child into a world that will try to destroy us both." But what she said was, "I'm fine, just nervous about tonight." He studied her for a long moment, and she knew he didn't believe her. But Min-hoo was nothing if not patient. He would wait, he would watch, and eventually, he would uncover every secret she tried to bury. "Then let's go show them what power looks like," he said, offering his arm. At the gala, Min-hoo's hand never left the small of her back. His touch was possessive, territorial, a silent declaration to every man and woman in that ballroom. "She's mine." And when Judge Morrison made the mistake of letting his eyes linger too long on the slit in her dress, Min-hoo's fingers tightened against her spine. A warning, a promise, a threat all wrapped into one gesture. Lashonda excused herself to the powder room, desperate for air that didn't taste like him. She braced her hands on the marble sink, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back was a stranger. Sleek, polished, the perfect Mafia wife. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Does he know about the baby? Or are you still playing games?" The nausea hit her so hard she barely made it to the stall. The The Mercedes dealership smelled like leather and broken dreams. Lashonda had chosen this place specifically. Upscale enough to be discreet, reputable enough to be safe. She needed a car with reinforced sides, bulletproof glass, a vehicle that could protect the secret growing inside her. The sales manager, a sharp-faced man named Richard Kwan, approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze swept over her assessment that made her skin crawl. "Mrs. Lee," he said, and there was something mocking in the way he pronounced her married name. "Looking for something practical?" Lashonda kept her expression neutral. "I need an SUV, armored, discreet modifications." Kwan's smile widened. "Of course, right this way." But as they walked through the showroom, she felt it, that prickling awareness that meant she was being watched, studied, judged. The other customers whispered behind their hands, their eyes tracking her like she was a stain on their expensive floor. Kwan led her to a black Mercedes G-Wagon, running his hand along the hood with theatrical appreciation. "This model has everything you need. Assuming, of course, that you have the authority to make such a purchase without consultation." The implication was clear. "You're just the wife, the trophy, the pretty thing he keeps in silk and diamonds." "I'm paying cash," Lashonda said coldly. "My money, my decision." "Ah." Kwan's expression shifted, something cruel flickering beneath the professional veneer. "You know, Mrs. Lee, we've been following the news. Your husband's recent legal troubles. Some are saying the empire is crumbling, that the federal noose is tightening." Lashonda's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen, a protective gesture she immediately regretted when Kwan's eyes tracked the movement. "Which makes me wonder," he continued, voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried through the showroom, "what you're really preparing for. An escape vehicle, perhaps? Running away before the walls close in?" "Watch your mouth," Lashonda warned, her courtroom voice emerging, sharp, authoritative. But Kwan wasn't alone. 2 security guards materialized from the shadows, and suddenly she understood. This wasn't a random insult. This was calculated, orchestrated. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Kwan said loudly, playing to the growing crowd of onlookers. "This dealership doesn't serve criminals, or their accomplices." "I'm an attorney," Lashonda said, her voice steady even as rage built in her chest. "I've broken no laws." "You've spent 3 years keeping a monster out of prison," Kwan shot back. "That makes you complicit. That makes you just as dirty as he is." He nodded to the guards. They moved toward her, and Lashonda's body coiled, every instinct screaming at her to run, to fight, to protect the life inside her. "Don't touch me," she warned. They didn't listen. The first guard grabbed her arm, and muscle memory took over. Lashonda twisted, using his momentum against him, her heel connecting with his knee in a move that was pure instinct. But the second guard was faster, and before she could react, he had her other arm pinned. "Get her out of here," Kwan ordered, "and make sure the cameras get a good shot." They dragged her toward the exit. Lashonda fought every step, her legal mind cataloging violations, assault, false imprisonment, defamation, but her body was focused on one thing, protecting her baby. The parking lot gravel bit into her knees as they shoved her down. Around her, phones emerged like weapons, recording her humiliation. Tomorrow, this would be viral. Tomorrow, the entire city would see Lee Min-hoo's wife on her knees in the dirt. Kwan stood over her, his shadow blocking the sun. "Tell your husband the Song family sends their regards, and tell him we're coming for everything he has." As they walked away, leaving her in the dust, Lashonda felt something inside her shift. The lawyer, the professional, the woman who'd spent 3 years playing by the rules, she cracked. What emerged was something else entirely. She pulled out her phone with steady hands and dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. "It's me," she said when he answered. "I need you to come get me. And Min-hoo." Her voice dropped, cold and precise. "Tell him I know who's been moving against him, and I know exactly how to make them bleed." Min-hoo's office occupied the entire top floor of his building, a cathedral of glass and steel that overlooked Atlanta like a throne room. When Lashonda arrived, escorted by his head of security and wrapped in a blanket that smelled like the man himself, he was standing at the window, his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care about the cost," he was saying, his voice deadly calm. "I want every financial record, every transaction, every dirty secret the Song family has buried. I want it in my hands by midnight." He ended the call and turned. The transformation on his face when he saw her, disheveled, dirt-stained, shaking, was volcanic. For a moment, she glimpsed the man beneath the mask, raw, furious, barely leashed. Who? It wasn't a question. It was a death sentence seeking a name. Richard Kwan. He works for the songs. Lashonda's voice was steadier than she felt. They wanted to send a message. Minhoo closed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted the murder in his eyes. Did they hurt you? No, the lie was automatic. Protective, I'm fine. You're bleeding. His thumb traced the cut on her cheek she hadn't even noticed. And you're crying. She wasn't. But when she touched her face, her fingers came away wet. Minhoo's jaw clenched, that muscle jumping again. He pulled her against him, one hand in her hair, the other pressed against her back. She felt his heartbeat, fast, furious, barely controlled. I'm going to burn their world down, he whispered against her temple. I'm going to make them wish they'd never learned your name. Don't. Lashonda pulled back, meeting his eyes. Don't use violence. Use what you're good at. Use the law. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You want legal warfare. I want annihilation, she corrected. But I want it to be so clean, so surgical, that they can't even accuse us of revenge. I want them to watch their empire crumble and know they did it to themselves. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Minhoo's face. You're terrifying when you're angry. I learned from the best. She stepped back, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. But there's something you need to know first. Something I've been hiding. His expression shifted, that predator's focus narrowing on her. Tell me. Lashonda took a breath, and with it, made a choice that would change everything. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. And before you ask, yes, it's yours. Yes, I'm keeping it. And no, that's not why I married you. The silence that followed was deafening. Minhoo stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Shock, fear, something that looked almost like joy before he buried it beneath his mask. How long have you known? His voice was barely above a whisper. 6 weeks, and you didn't tell me. Not an accusation, an observation. I was trying to figure out how. She admitted. How to tell the most dangerous man in Atlanta that I'm bringing his child into a world that wants us both dead. Minhoo moved then, dropping to his knees in front of her. His hands settled on her hips, his forehead pressing against her stomach through the blanket. She felt him shaking, felt the careful control he maintained every moment of every day finally fracturing. I already knew, he said against her. I've known for 3 weeks. Lashonda's world tilted. What? Your doctor is on my payroll. Has been for months. He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright. I've been child-proofing my life, dismantling the dangerous pieces, building something clean enough to give our baby a future. That's why the songs are moving now. They know I'm vulnerable. You should have told me. You should have told me. He rose, his hands framing her face again. We're both liars, Lashonda, both hiding behind our masks. But not anymore. He kissed her then, fierce and claiming and desperate. She tasted his fear and his fury, felt the tremor in his hands as they mapped her body like he was memorizing every curve. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. The dealership, she said. We handle it together, as partners. As partners, he agreed. But first, I need to show you something. He led her to his desk, where a laptop displayed what looked like a financial flowchart, except the numbers were staggering, and every connection led back to the Song family. I've been building this for 2 years, Minhoo said. A map of every illegal transaction, every dirty deal, every skeleton in their closet. I was waiting for the right moment to strike. They just gave it to me. Lashonda studied the screen, her legal mind already formulating strategies. We leak this to the SEC, to the FBI. We don't touch them directly. We let the federal government do our dirty work. And the dealership? Her smile was sharp enough to cut. I buy it. Not you, me. I purchase the entire franchise, fire Kwan publicly, and donate the profits to domestic violence shelters. They wanted to humiliate me. Instead, they're going to make me a philanthropist. Minhoo laughed, the sound rusty like he'd forgotten how. This is why I love you. The words hung between them, unplanned, raw. Lashonda's breath caught. Say it again, she whispered. I love you. This time, he meant it. I've loved you since the moment you looked me in the eye and told me I was going to prison if I didn't clean up my act. I've loved you through every midnight call, every legal brief, Every time you've saved my life without asking for anything in return." Lashonda felt tears sliding down her cheeks again, but these were different. "I love you too. God help me, I love you too." They stood there in his glass tower, two people who'd spent years circling each other finally colliding. Below them, the city glittered, unaware that its power structure was about to shift. "What happens now?" she asked. Minhu's hand settled over her stomach, protective and possessive. "Now, we remind Atlanta why they should have left us alone, and then we build something new, something clean, something worthy of our child. Together?" "Together," he promised. "No more masks, no more secrets, just us against the world." And for the first time in 3 years, Lashonda believed him. The safe house smelled like pine and old wood, tucked deep in the North Georgia mountains, where cell signals died and secrets thrived. Minhu had insisted they disappear for 72 hours, while his team executed the financial strike against the Song family. Lashonda had agreed, but only because her body was still humming with adrenaline from the dealership, and she knew what adrenaline did to pregnant women. She stood in the kitchen, moonlight streaming through the windows, heating water for tea she wouldn't drink. Behind her, she heard Minhu's footsteps on the stairs, deliberate, measured, the walk of a man who'd learned to move through the world like smoke. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "So should you." She didn't turn around, didn't trust herself to look at him. Not when her emotions were this raw, this close to the surface. He moved into her space anyway, his chest brushing against her back as he reached around her to turn off the stove. His breath was warm against her neck, and she felt goosebumps rise despite the heat still radiating from the burner. "Talk to me," he murmured. "You've been silent since we left the city." Lashonda's fingers gripped the counter edge. "I keep seeing it, Kwan's face. The way they looked at me like I was nothing. Like I was just some ornament you'd eventually discard. They were wrong." "Were they?" She finally turned, and the movement brought them chest to chest in the small kitchen. "What am I to you, Minhu? Really? A wife on paper? A convenient attorney? A woman carrying your heir?" His jaw tightened, that dangerous light flickering in his eyes. "You're the only person in this world who isn't afraid of me. The only one who looks at me and sees more than the monster everyone else does. You're the reason I wake up. The reason I'm trying to be better." "Pretty words," she whispered, but her voice cracked. "But words are easy. Anyone can say them. Then let me show you." His hands came up, framing her face with a tenderness that contradicted everything she knew about him. "Let me show you what you are to me." The kiss was different this time. Slower, deeper, laced with something that felt like desperation. His tongue traced the seam of her lips until she opened for him, and the sound he made was purely male satisfaction. Lashonda's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed warnings she no longer wanted to hear. They moved together through the darkened house, a tangle of limbs and shared breath, until they reached the bedroom. Minhu pulled back, his eyes searching hers in the shadows, asking a question he didn't voice. Lashonda answered by pulling him down to her, and the world narrowed to just this, his hands mapping her body like territory he was claiming, her fingers threading through his hair, the taste of him on her tongue. When they finally came together, it was with a desperation that bordered on violence, a need that had been building for 3 years finally unleashed. And in the aftermath, as they lay tangled in sweat-dampened sheets, Lashonda felt something shift inside her, a wall crumbling, a defense falling. Then the window shattered, glass exploded inward, and Minhu's body covered hers before her mind could process the threat. She heard the distinctive pop of suppressed gunfire, felt him grunt as something hit the headboard above them. "Stay down," he growled, already moving, pulling a gun from beneath the mattress with the efficiency of a man who'd expected this. But Lashonda was already rolling off the bed, her body moving on pure instinct. She grabbed her dress from the floor, wrapping it around her fist as she approached the window. 3 figures dressed in black were scaling the porch, their movements professional, coordinated. "Lashonda, get back." She didn't listen. When the first man came through the window, she was waiting. Her improvised weapon caught him across the throat, and as he staggered, she used his momentum to flip him onto the floor. The move was textbook, something she shouldn't have known, something that belonged to a different life. The second attacker came faster, but Lashonda was faster still. She caught his wrist, twisted, and the satisfying crack of breaking bone echoed through the room. His gun clattered to the floor, and she kicked it away with a precision that spoke of extensive training. Minhu stood frozen, his own weapon still raised, watching his pregnant wife dismantle a professional hit squad with her bare hands. The third man was smarter. He didn't come through the window. Instead, he fired 3 rounds through the wall, forcing Lashonda to dive for cover. But she'd already calculated the trajectory, already knew where he'd be standing. She grabbed the fallen gun, chambered a round, and put 2 bullets through the wall exactly where his center mass should be. The body that fell into view confirmed her accuracy. Silence descended, broken only by their ragged breathing and the groans of the man with the broken wrist. Lashonda stood slowly, the gun still steady in her hands, her dark skin gleaming with sweat and moonlight, her eyes cold as winter. "Who are you?" Minhu's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the moment he understood. This wasn't shock or luck or adrenaline. This was training, years of it, the kind that only came from one place. "My name is Lashonda Williams," she said quietly, setting the gun down with deliberate care. "But 6 years ago, I was Special Agent Taylor, embedded in the FBI's organized crime unit, and you, Lee Minhu, were my assignment." Minhu didn't speak, didn't move. He just stared at her like she was a ghost, a phantom conjured from his worst nightmares. Lashonda watched emotions flicker across his face. Betrayal, rage, something that looked like grief, before the mask slammed back into place. "How long?" His voice was ice. "I was supposed to bring you down 3 years ago," she admitted, her own hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "I had everything. Wiretaps, financial records, enough evidence to bury you for life. But you didn't. Not a question. An accusation. No, I didn't." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware she was standing in a torn dress, covered in blood that wasn't hers, confessing treason to the man she loved. "Because somewhere between the surveillance and the stakeouts, between watching you and trying to understand you, I realized you weren't the monster they told me you were. I've killed people, Lashonda." His voice was dead, hollow. "I've done things that would keep you awake at night." "I know." She stepped toward him, and he flinched. The small movement broke something inside her. "I know exactly who you are, Minhu. I've known from the beginning, and I chose you anyway. You chose to lie to me." He finally moved, pacing like a caged animal. "Everything we've built, everything we've shared, it's all been a lie." "No." Her voice cracked. "The job was a lie. The mission was a lie. But this," she pressed her hand to her stomach, "this is real. What I feel for you is real. The reason I burned my entire career, destroyed evidence, and made myself a fugitive from my own agency, that was real." Minhu laughed, but it was a broken sound. "You're telling me you committed treason for love? That you threw away everything you believed in because of feelings? I'm telling you I chose to see the truth instead of the narrative they fed me." Lashonda's voice strengthened. "They wanted a monster. I found a man trying to survive a system that would have killed him if he'd shown any weakness. They wanted a criminal. I found someone protecting his family the only way he knew how. And now?" He turned to face her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Now that the songs know who you really are, now that there's a price on your head from both sides of the law, what now, Agent Taylor? Now I fight." She moved closer, close enough to touch him if he'd let her. "I fight for us. For our baby. For the future you've been trying to build. They'll never stop coming. Then we don't stop fighting." Something shifted in his expression, that terrible control finally cracking. "I should hate you. I should put a bullet in you myself for what you've done." "I know." Lashonda's voice was steady. "But you won't, because despite everything, despite the lies and the secrets, you love me, just like I love you." "Love." He spat the word like poison. "You don't know what that word means." "Then let me show you." She closed the final distance between them, her hands cupping his face even as he tried to pull away. "I love you enough to die for you. I love you enough to become a traitor to everything I was raised to believe in. I love you enough to bring our child into this world knowing we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders." Minhu's resistance crumbled. His forehead dropped to hers, and she felt wetness on her cheeks that might have been his tears or hers or both. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "Not after I just found you. Then don't let me go." They stood there in the wreckage of the safe house, holding each other while sirens wailed in the distance. Lashonda knew they had minutes, maybe less, before they had to run again. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. "We need to move," Minhu finally said, pulling back. His eyes were still red, but the predator was back, calculating their next move. "My people will have heard the shots. They'll send cleanup, but we can't be here when." I'm not running. Lashonda's voice was steel. Not anymore. I'm tired of hiding, Minhu. Tired of living in the shadows. They came after me in my own safe house. They sent a hit squad after a pregnant woman. That ends now. What are you suggesting? Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. I'm suggesting we stop playing defense. You want to leave the underworld? Fine, but we do it on our terms. We expose everyone. The songs, the corrupt FBI agents who want me dead for knowing too much. Every dirty cop and politician in your pocket. We burn it all down and walk away clean. That's suicide. That's survival. She grabbed his hand, pressing it against her stomach where their child grew. Our baby deserves better than this. Better than safe houses and hit squads and midnight runs. You've been dismantling your empire piece by piece, trying to be worthy of me. Now let me help you finish it. Minhu stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the exact instant he made his decision. We do this together. No more secrets, no more lies, no more secrets, she agreed. He kissed her then, hard and claiming, a promise and a threat all in one. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard, both covered in blood and glass and the remnants of their old lives. That dress you bought for your escape, Minhu said quietly, gesturing to the garment bag she'd hidden in the closet. The one you were going to wear when you left me. What about it? His eyes were dark, dangerous, possessive. That dress isn't leaving this house, and neither are you. Not without me, not ever again. The press conference was scheduled for noon at the Four Seasons Hotel, and by 11:45, every major news outlet in Atlanta was present. Minhu stood backstage, adjusting his tie with fingers that didn't shake despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. Lashonda appeared beside him, devastating in a crimson dress that hugged her curves and announced to the world that she was done hiding. Her makeup covered the bruises from the safe house attack, but nothing could hide the fire in her eyes. Ready? She asked. To commit social suicide and become public enemy number one? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Absolutely, that's not what we're doing. She straightened his collar, the gesture intimate, familiar. We're taking our power back. There's a difference. On the other side of the curtain, the crowd was restless. Reporters smelled blood, and Minhu had promised them a feast. The leaked information had been strategic, just enough to whet their appetite, not enough to satisfy their hunger. Mr. Lee, Mrs. Lee, his press secretary whispered. They're ready for you. They walked out together, hand in hand, and the camera flashes were blinding. Minhu approached the podium with Lashonda at his side, and the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. United front. Equal partnership. Two people who'd decided to stop playing by everyone else's rules. Thank you for coming, Minhu began, his voice carrying across the room with natural authority. I've called this conference to address several accusations against my family and my business operations. But before I do, I want to introduce you to someone. He gestured to Lashonda, who stepped forward with her head high. This is my wife, Lashonda Williams Lee. She's one of the most brilliant attorneys in this state, and she's also a former FBI agent who spent 3 years investigating me. The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and security had to form a barrier to keep the crowd from rushing the stage. Minhu waited, patient as always, until the chaos died down. My wife made a choice 3 years ago, he continued. She chose to see the truth instead of the narrative her superiors fed her. She discovered that the criminal empire I supposedly ran was actually a network of legitimate businesses being sabotaged by the very people who claimed to be investigating me. Lashonda took over, her courtroom voice cutting through the noise. I have evidence, irrefutable evidence, that members of the FBI's organized crime unit have been working with the Song family to eliminate competition and consolidate power. They used my investigation as a cover for their own criminal activities. She pressed a button, and the screen behind them lit up with financial records, wire transfers, photographs of federal agents meeting with known criminals. The evidence was damning, comprehensive, the product of 3 years of meticulous documentation. The agents who were supposed to be upholding the law have been breaking it, Lashonda said. And when I tried to report it through proper channels, they tried to have me killed. Another click, another image. The safe house, bullet holes in the walls, bodies on the floor. This attack happened 2 nights ago. The men who came for me were hired by people within my own agency, because I knew too much. Because I chose truth over loyalty to a corrupt system. The room was silent now, every person hanging on her words. Minhu picked up the narrative, his voice steady, confident. I've spent the last 2 years working with the Attorney General's office to build a case against the Song family and their associates. Every illegal transaction, every bribe, every murder, we have documentation. And today, we're releasing all of it. But we're not stopping there, Lashonda added. She pulled out another document, holding it up for the cameras. This is the deed to Prestige Motors, the dealership where I was assaulted 4 days ago. As of this morning, I own it. And I'm donating 100% of the profits to organizations that support victims of domestic violence and police brutality. The symbolism was perfect. The woman they'd tried to humiliate now owned their business. The prey had become the predator. As for my so-called criminal empire, Minhu said, I'm dissolving it. Every business, every asset, every holding, it's all being transferred to legitimate operations or liquidated. The Lee family is leaving the shadows. We're done playing games with people who think they're above the law. A reporter shouted from the back. What about the Song family? What about retaliation? Minhu's smile was cold, calculated. The Song family is currently being raided by federal agents, the honest ones. They'll be facing charges of racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 40 other counts. Their empire ends today. And the corrupt agents? Another reporter called out. Lashonda's expression was fierce. Already arrested. Internal Affairs has been investigating them for months with my cooperation. Today's attack on the Songs is just the beginning. Every dirty cop, every corrupt official, everyone who thought they could hide in the shadows, they're being dragged into the light. The questions came fast and furious after that, but Minhu and Lashonda had said everything they needed to say. They walked off stage together, leaving chaos in their wake, and neither of them looked back. In the car, Minhu finally exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders. We just made enemies of some very powerful people. We made enemies of people who were already trying to kill us. Lashonda corrected. Now they just have to do it publicly. He laughed, the sound genuine for the first time in days. You're terrifying. You know that? I learned from watching you. She leaned against him, her hand finding his. What happens now? Now? Minhu's fingers intertwined with hers. Protective, possessive. Now we wait for the fallout. And then we start building something new. Something clean. Something our child can be proud of. Lashonda closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe, just for a moment, that it might actually work. That they might actually survive this. Together? She whispered. Always together. He promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. I'm not letting you go. Not ever again. 6 months later, the nursery was finally finished. Soft gray walls, white furniture, and a mobile of black roses that turned slowly in the air conditioning. Lashonda stood in the doorway, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching Minhu assemble the crib with a focus usually reserved for hostile takeovers. You know, we could have hired someone to do that, she said, amused. I'm doing it. His voice was stubborn, determined. My child sleeps in a crib I built with my own hands. She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. This version of Minhu, domestic, focused on building instead of destroying, was one she'd never imagined existed. But here he was, cursing softly at instruction manuals and looking absolutely devastated when he realized he'd put Panel B where Panel C should go. The last 6 months had been chaos. Trials, depositions, media circuses as the Atlanta underworld imploded under the weight of their revelations. The Song family was destroyed, their assets seized, their leadership behind bars. The corrupt FBI agents had been prosecuted, their careers ended, their reputations shattered, and Minhu's empire had been systematically dismantled. Every illegal venture closed or legitimized. They'd both testified, both faced death threats, both lived with security details that made grocery shopping feel like a military operation. But they'd survived, together. Done, Minhu announced, stepping back to survey his handiwork. The crib was slightly crooked, but it was sturdy and safe and built with more love than any store-bought furniture could ever contain. Lashonda moved into the room, wrapping her arms around him from behind as best she could with her belly in the way. It's perfect. It's a disaster, he countered, but she heard the pride in his voice. It's perfect because you made it, she corrected, pressing her cheek against his back. Just like everything else we've built together. He turned in her embrace, his hands settling on her hips, thumb tracing gentle circles over her stomach. I never thought I'd have this. A family, a future, someone who looks at me and sees more than the sum of my sins. You're more than your past, Minhu. You always have been." They stood there, swaying slightly, two people who'd fought their way through hell to find each other. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, and Minhu's face transformed into wonder. "She's restless today," he murmured, dropping to his knees to press his lips against Lashonda's belly. "Just like her mother, or stubborn like her father." Lashonda ran her fingers through his hair, marveling at how far they'd come. From adversaries to lovers to partners to this, standing in a nursery, planning for a future neither of them had thought possible. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Minhu's security chief entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Sir, there's a delivery for Mrs. Lee." Lashonda tensed, but Minhu squeezed her hand. The death threats had lessened but never fully stopped. Every delivery was now scrutinized, x-rayed, treated like a potential weapon. "It's clear," the security chief assured them. "Just flowers." They descended the stairs together, and on the entry table sat a single black rose in a crystal vase. Lashonda's breath caught. After everything, after all the revelations and confessions, Minhu was still sending her black roses. But this time, there was a card. Minhu picked it up, reading aloud. In Korean flower language, a black rose means you are my only one, my beginning and my end. I sent you one every week for 3 years, hoping you'd understand what I couldn't say out loud. I love you. I've always loved you. And I'll love you until my last breath. Lashonda felt tears streaming down her face, hormones and emotion combining into something overwhelming. "You could have just told me," she said through her tears. "I was afraid." His voice was raw, honest, afraid you'd see it as manipulation, afraid you'd think I was trying to control you, afraid that if I admitted how much I needed you, you'd run. I did run. She moved into his arms, feeling them close around her like a shield, and you came after me anyway, always. He pressed his lips to her forehead. "I'll always come after you, Lashonda, in this life and whatever comes after." They stood there, wrapped in each other, when Lashonda felt it, a wetness between her legs, a sudden pressure that made her gasp. "Minhu," she said quietly, "I think my water just broke." For a moment, the most dangerous man in Atlanta looked absolutely terrified. Then his training kicked in, that cold efficiency taking over. "Hospital. Now. Where's your bag?" "Upstairs." "But Minhu." "I've got you." He swept her into his arms despite her protests about being too heavy, carrying her toward the door like she weighed nothing. "I've got both of you." The drive to the hospital was a blur of contractions and reassurances, Minhu's hand gripping hers like a lifeline. When they finally wheeled her into delivery, he refused to leave her side, whispering encouragement in Korean and English, pressing cool cloths to her forehead, being exactly what she needed. And then, after hours that felt like minutes and minutes that felt like hours, their daughter entered the world screaming her fury at being born. "She's perfect," the doctor announced, placing the baby on Lashonda's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Lashonda looked down at her daughter, dark skin like hers, Minhu's eyes, a shock of black hair, and felt her entire world shift. This tiny, furious creature was worth everything they'd endured. Every lie, every secret, every battle. Minhu leaned over them both, his finger brushing their daughter's cheek with devastating gentleness. "What should we name her?" Lashonda looked up at him, at this man who'd traveled from darkness into light just to be worthy of her love. "Grace," she said softly. "Grace Min Lee. Because that's what we've been given, a chance to start again, a chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of who we used to be." "Grace," Minhu repeated, and his voice broke on the word. "Hello, Grace. I'm your father, and I promise you'll never know the world I came from. I promise you'll only know love and safety and truth." As they sat there, their small family finally complete, neither of them noticed the final black rose that had been delivered to the hospital room, or the card that read simply, "Finally real, finally free, finally home." Outside, Atlanta glittered in the darkness, a city transformed by their choices, their sacrifices, their refusal to accept the roles others had written for them. The underworld had fallen. The corrupt had been exposed. And from the ruins, something new had grown. Love, family, legacy. And somewhere in the shadows, the last remnants of the Song family plotted their revenge, not knowing that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a man with nothing to lose. It's a father with everything to protect. But that was a story for another day. For now, in this moment, there was only peace, only joy, only the three of them against the world, and that was more than enough. So there you have it. Lashonda Williams went from FBI agent to defense attorney to Mafia wife to mother, all while dismantling an empire and building a legacy that would make her daughter proud. And Lee Min-ho? That dangerous, beautiful man, transformed from Atlanta's most feared underworld figure into a father who assembles cribs with his own hands and sends black roses that mean you're my only one. But here's the thing about love stories born in darkness. They never truly end, do they? Because somewhere out there, the Song family is plotting. Somewhere in the shadows, enemies are gathering. And Grace Min Lee, that precious baby girl sleeping peacefully in her slightly crooked crib, she's going to grow up to be more dangerous than both her parents combined. Want to know what happens when Grace turns 18 and discovers exactly who her parents used to be? Want to see what happens when old enemies resurface and that carefully built peaceful life gets shattered? Want to watch Min-ho prove that a retired lion is still the deadliest predator in the jungle when someone threatens his family? Then hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like if you're Team Lashonda and Min-ho, and drop a comment telling me, would you have burned your entire career for love? Would you have chosen the monster over the mission? Type Black Rose if you believe real love is worth any sacrifice. Share this story with someone who needs to know that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love with the right person. Because trust me, Grace's story, it's going to be even more explosive than her parents. New episodes drop every week. Don't miss what happens next in the Lee family saga, because in Atlanta's underworld, peace never lasts long, and those black roses, they're about to bloom again. Subscribe, like, comment. Let's build this legacy together. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go figure out how a retired Mafia boss handles parent-teacher conferences. Something tells me it's going to be interesting. See you in the next chapter.